everyone. Welcome to the Business Growth Pod. I'm your host, Allan Draper. Glad to have you today. I'm very excited about our episode. I've had today's guest on before, but it's been a while, so I'm excited to catch up, and I'm very excited about our topic today. So our guest today is a former MLB pitcher. His name is Jason Jarvis. Jason was an academic All-American his junior year of college, and then he went on to play in the MLB from 1994 to 98. The last 20 years, he has spent in the home building and land development space for many national public builders. So he has a ton of business acumen and experience, and I'm excited for the show today. Welcome, Jason. Glad to have you back.
Hey, Allan, it's great to be back. Always fun to catch up and then talk sports and business and everything else that's going on. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure. It's, the beginning of the MLB season, which is a blessing because there was a point where I didn't know that we would be watching baseball, this early. So, it's great to catch up. It's really cool to hear some of your stories about playing at the highest level. And what we're going to focus today on is we're going to try to answer this question for our listener. Are you financially prepared to start a business? Before we get into that, give us just kind of this brief synopsis of your baseball career and how that led you into business and what you've been doing ever since.
Sure. So I, played all through Little League growing up, played in high school. I grew up just north of Salt Lake City, Utah, played at Viewmont High School up there, and then had an opportunity to, get a scholarship and played at the University of Utah. And then I also played at another school just outside of Omaha called Bellevue University, and played there through my junior year, and then had the chance to get drafted and was drafted by the Yankees in the 13th round. And then played a couple of years with them, and then was involved in, the blockbuster trade of the year back in '95 with David Cone coming over from the Blue Jays to the Yankees, and was traded from the Yankees over to the Blue Jays. And so spent the balance of my career over with the Blue Jays. And so, two top teams in the American League East, the Blue Jays were kind of starting their fire sale. They had won, I think, back-to-back World Series in '92 and '93. And then the Yankees, that kind of started their dynasty, with the Jeter, Rivera, Pettit, dynasty that they had with the core four going on through there, Mariano Rivera. And so, got a chance to play with a lot of great guys, Roy Halladay, Billy Koch, some of those guys over with the Blue Jays, became teammates and good friends, and still keep in touch with some of them till today. But that was kind of my path. And I just got to the point where I had gotten married while I was playing and had my first boy. And it just kind of got to the point where I had some decisions to make, family wise, business wise. And I had my background was in accounting actually for school. And so I had the opportunity to walk into some pretty good jobs when I finished playing, and it was enticing rather than bouncing back and forth between the minor league organizations and the buck leagues and the fun things that go on there. Great stories, but tough life. And had a chance to start pursuing my professional career. I ended up getting involved in the home building, the land development industry. I've loved it. I think part of it is because it's almost like a game. Every project has new challenges and new obstacles to overcome, from the financial side to the operational side. And I've just really enjoyed my time, growing in that industry.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. And I know that you bring a lot of experience to the table. And so when you think of that question, are you financially prepared to start a business, right? It's a question that a lot of startup entrepreneurs ask themselves. And, it's a great question, right? Because you have to be financially prepared. But just that kind of semi-vague question, what is the first thing that you think of in terms of for a first-time entrepreneur, in order for them to be financially prepared, what is kind of, the number one thing that you think of that they need to do?
I think the biggest thing is do you truly understand what you're getting into, what you're trying to accomplish, and what's, have you set yourself up to succeed in the time frame? I think everybody, what do they say? 3 years of being in business before you start really making a good profit is a good metric. Do you have the ability to live on a super tight budget, maybe personally, in order to make your professional sacrifices, come to fruition? I think knowing what you're getting into, eyes wide open with the economics, the financial metrics, making sure you've either put your time together in your budget or gotten with somebody, an accountant or a financial expert who knows the industry you're looking at to help guide you through and get that advice. Because I think one of the reasons why businesses fail is because they're not capitalized correctly. That doesn't mean you have millions. It just means you're not capitalized correctly.
Yeah, no, 100%. Are you recommending that they, that an entrepreneur, a startup entrepreneur, creates a budget for themselves or for their business, or both?
I think you've got to go both, right? Because if you can't survive personally, or understand what sacrifices that's going to make to your monthly income, then you're definitely not going to be in it for the long haul on the business side. Everybody needs to pay their bills. Everybody needs to be able to operate. So I think, a couple of things when I've gotten involved in things, I think you have to be able to weather some storms, and construction's a great example of that now. When COVID hit, as well as many industries, but especially with that, all of your manufacturing, your lumber, windows, warehouses were shut down where people, couldn't work because they were recovering, and everything, supply chain issues. We're still battling through those currently. If you're scraping by month to month, those people didn't make it. So you really, I think, have to be able to weather the storm and have a little bit of expectation of how long is it going to take you to operate and cover your costs, cover your liabilities that you're setting yourself up for. I think everybody looks at the outcome and what the potential it could be, but I think a lot of good potential businesses fell just because people aren't fully vested in what it's going to cost to get there.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The number one reason why businesses fail is because of a lack of cash flow, right? They don't have the finances to sustain the operations of the company. But I think there's multiple things at play, not just, hey, how much money did I raise or save or borrow or whatever, right? How much money did I start the company with? And that's what a lot of people think. And they think about business that way also. Hey, what's my top line revenue? I'm a lot more focused on what comes in between the top and bottom lines, because those are the things that we control, right? So if I've got a startup, entrepreneur that has a ton of capital, but he has a ton of expenses, but then I have versus a startup entrepreneur that has a little bit of capital and not very many expenses, I honestly think that I would go with the former, right? The one that has the fewer expenses, right? Because it seems like you can be more flexible, right? And I think it depends on the burn rate and all of those things, but that's why smaller companies are more agile. They can react faster to the marketplace, right? It's a lot harder to turn a huge ship. But do you feel similarly about that? About focusing on kind of keeping costs down, both personal and business costs, while the business is getting up and running?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, that's kind of what I was, maybe didn't do a very good job of explaining when I said you have to look at your personal, what do you need to survive personally? and what are you going to be able to take from that business? Because anybody who started a business, I mean, other than covering some minor expenses, it's not really like you're making a paycheck that first 3, 6, 9 months, maybe even a year, depending on the industry. So I couldn't agree with you more. If you're looking at, two different businesses and you've got one who's got you've got to generate a lot of monthly income or revenue to be able to offset those operational costs, as opposed to somebody who's got minimal monthly outflow, you're able probably to operate more efficiently because there's less to monitor, right? There's less things that could go wrong if you've got fewer outgoing expenses, whether probably less supply chain issues, less hours of operation, whatever it may be, that you're going to have to get into, that you're going to be able to manage tighter, not necessarily better, but tighter. Because you're going to have less soaking up your time to maybe distract you on things. So I think looking at that from an inflow outflow standpoint is a very big decision. I don't think that's the only decision that you need to focus on, but I think that should play a part in which way you lean.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's so hard to know how much money a business should start with. I think it's really hard. What do you recommend people should do in order to get in at least a ballpark number? Get a number that's, it's reasonable without having a crystal ball.
I mean, personally, and again, this is probably going to vary a little bit industry to industry, but with what I've been involved with, I mean, if you can operate for 6 months to a year, without taking a lot out, I think you're banking on a lot to happen quickly, and maybe there are some opportunities that do that, but by the time you refine your process, you work with your suppliers, you develop those relationships, you market it, you get your word out. I mean, unless you've got customers right away pounding on your door that you're bringing with you from another opportunity, maybe you're working for somebody and now you're starting your own business and you have a clientele that's immediately coming with you, which then you get into non-competes and things like that. But
right.
I think that's something you have to understand and look at. I think a good rule of thumb is that 6 months to a year of being able to operate, to make sure you give it a good shot, because if not, you're kind of rolling the dice on is it the right time? Because a lot of that could just be timing. Maybe you hit the market at the right time and you walked into a lot of clients, but if you don't, you got to be able to weather a little bit and go out and grow it.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think that, and again, going back to what we were saying before about, I like the entrepreneur that starts with fewer costs. And there's two things to think about here. It's what does it cost to operate my business for that 6 to 12 months? And what does it cost to operate my household? So the answer to this question is different if, I have a mortgage, if I have, I'm married, I have a bunch of kids, whatever, versus somebody that's like, hey, I actually live in my parents' basement. And so I can really, live pretty, on a pretty short, tight budget. And I also think there's this aspect of what can I cut away from my personal life that a lot of entrepreneurs don't think about. Being an entrepreneur is being uncomfortable. It's putting yourself in a position where you don't have all the answers. You don't know what's going to happen. You're really depending on yourself a lot, which I can't imagine doing anything else. But part of that is finding out what you're capable of cutting away. And if your why is big enough, if your purpose for your business is big enough, man, you can do just about, you could strip down monthly expenses to, very, very little.
It all becomes what you're comfortable with, right? I mean, I think a lot of us, we get to the point where we're comfortable and it's, oh, I couldn't cut that. Well, I couldn't cut that. Well, I think being able to stay, whether you want to call it frugal, tight, balanced, but I think a lot of us, we get so comfortable that you think there are things that you must have that you really don't. You can live without. And that's and that's different for everybody. Some people, they can't live without that, nice sports car that I see you drive around in. I'm an Allan, and I'm jealous. I'm super jealous. I just want to test drive it. But you're exactly right. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity, and sometimes until your back's forced to that, and like you said, being uncomfortable, you really don't quite know how uncomfortable you can live until maybe you're forced to.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And it's common knowledge that I was a practicing attorney, had a comfortable job in, the Phoenix area. Had a nice, house, and I moved out of it so I could rent it, and moved into a 2-bedroom apartment it was 2 kids at the time and my wife. And my partner, who's my brother, was sleeping in the living room for a couple of months in that 2-bedroom apartment. And I think for me, and I wasn't driving a nice sports car back then, right? I think it's cool to be able to have a story like that. I love asking people like, hey, tell me about your startup story. And when we're answering this question,
I think that's how you learn to appreciate that, right? That's how you really learn to appreciate the journey.
Yeah, 100%. You get to the point where it just means a lot more if you're on kind of a shoestring budget. And now, that being said, you have to have a business plan, a model, goals that will bring you financial prosperity. A business has to make money, or it will fail. And so I think the goal isn't to start big, it's to end big, right? Or get to the point where, it's generating a lot of revenue. But, answering this question, are you financially prepared to start a business? I think it's a great question to ask. What can I cut away, right? Like, what can I remove from my budget?
Well, Allan, you were an attorney. I mean, I'm sure you dealt with contracts a lot, right? The reason why we have contracts and agreements is for if things go south. Right. If everything goes the way that we all think it's going to go between the two parties, there's really no need for the agreement. The reason why you need it is if there becomes, people don't see eye to eye and there's a conflict. So, where I kind of go with that is so what are you, you have to kind of look at a worst case scenario, right? For that longevity of how long, about what it's going to take. Is your business seasonal? Because if it's seasonal, Are you making enough money during the good times to survive through the slow times? And if it's weather based, what if that's a really bad weather? What's a really bad winter? So there's lots of things that you have to kind of put a realistic contingency in your plan for things that maybe you don't normally think about until you get into the business. I know we in construction, we look a lot with weather. I've got regions all over where I get, I feel like I'm a meteorologist now. I have to go and look and forecast, hey, we're running into rainy season in Florida and we're trying to get projects paved. We're probably going to have to expand that schedule a little bit. Or, Denver had an unseasonably warm winter and we were able to get a lot more done than we thought, but we can't bank on that. And so I think there's, whatever your industry is, there's contingencies you have to be realistic with that you're going to need to survive. And that's where I kind of say that, that 6 to 12 months should be able to get you through a cycle of the oh shits, pardon my French,
exactly,
that are going to come up.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's, the one thing that we can anticipate about business is that we can't anticipate anything, right? We know what's happened in the past, right? And that helps a lot, but we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, in some sectors, they're still dealing with COVID issues. No one could have predicted COVID, but now we can. There are all sorts of companies that are becoming much more efficient, working from home. They're handling safety issues differently because of this opportunity that COVID has given us. But it's easier to look backward, than forward sometimes. And so that being said, how does a startup anticipate costs? Like, what can they do? What type of research or what type of planning can they do to make projections or budgets or estimates for business specific costs?
Boy, isn't that the $1 million question, right? I think we all give our opinions and we all have it. Here's what I would do. And I think a lot of that gets industry specific as well. But I'm telling you, I'll use an example from my current professional life right now. So we have markets all over the U.S. We're in the build to rent sector now. So we're building communities that are all for rent. That's kind of been the new craze, and it's been great. There's a lot of different areas where that's affected in different markets, and we're going into new markets. And when I go into a new market the first time for a project, there's a learning curve that we have, that we pick up efficiencies on the second, third, and fourth project in that market. We're just starting to get into Raleigh, North Carolina. I've never built anything in Raleigh, North Carolina. Now I'm spending a lot of time with professionals in that market, engineers, other home builders, other construction, general contractors, to make sure that when we're setting up our plan, here's things that we didn't think about. I rely a lot on others' expertise to kind of set that up. And so if I'm going into my own startup and I'm going to start something up, I'm going to look at people that have been successful, not just in life, but in that industry, and see what I can learn, pick up, whether it's they're going to consult for me, whatever I can do to make sure that my plan is executable, right? You can have the best plan on paper. Anybody can pencil with the numbers, but if you can't execute that plan, it really isn't worth the paper that it's on, So I try to latch onto as many professionals in the market that can share certain knowledge. And like you said, you can't anticipate anything. That's one of the conversations we have a lot. What else am I missing? What else could affect the schedule that we're not thinking about? What else could affect material supplies that we don't know? Have we ordered everything on time? When do we need to order things? Just having those conversations, because it's different in Tampa than it is in Raleigh than it is in Phoenix. So I think understanding what you're getting into is going to help you succeed the more you understand, right? Knowledge is power.
Yeah. I love this idea of finding a mentor or surrounding yourself with a group of people that have already done it, been there. I think that's a great idea for those that are looking for creating a budget. There's a lot of Facebook groups that are industry specific. I admin one in the pest control industry, and it's just owners of pest control companies, and we're just talking about issues that we face. And I think this is a great idea for a startup. And some startups don't have an exact match, whether it's geographically or maybe it's a industry niche or something. But I think surrounding yourself and start asking questions. I think our entrepreneurs sometimes don't realize that they're not alone, right? They're not alone, and they can ask questions. And some of my greatest friends are my competitors, people that I can ask. They'll tell me anything. They want to help just the industry as a whole. And they know that if they help me, that will come back somewhere down the road. And I think this would be a great idea for somebody in an industry to start asking these questions. Hey, tell me about your startup costs, and get really specific. And maybe you need a group of 2 or 3 or 10 or 20 people that you can ask different questions to. What expenses did you have that you didn't expect your first year? What expenses did you have year 1 that you didn't have year 2? And a lot of this is going to be dependent on the trajectory and the growth of the company, right? There's going to be a lot more expenses. So to find kind of this perfect mentor match, if one exists, you want to find a mentor that grew year 1, year 2, or did similar types of things that you're wanting to accomplish. And if I could go back, I wasn't great at setting budgets, and I'm still not. I'm still starting businesses. And part of the issue is you don't really know anybody in a new industry or when you're starting a company until after you're in it a little while, right? So it does require that upfront research and spending time, looking for resources, exactly like you're doing in Raleigh. I think that is a fantastic idea.
It's kind of almost like you have to be the undercover boss, so to
Yeah.
speak. Like, if I'm gonna open up and I'm gonna be an entrepreneur in this industry, maybe I need to go work a frontline job for a couple months to just understand the process and what do these people deal with, and how can I be better? How can I do it better than what they're doing? And I think I think a lot of people, I think it comes down to a lot of people have great ideas, and it's the ones that take the risk to implement it are the ones that are usually successful, right? I mean, I sit around all the time and think of, like, how did I not think to put that into motion and make the kind of money this guy? That is such an easy idea. But I think there's great ideas all over. It's who's going to get off the couch and make it happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And it takes work. Like you said, not everybody wants to go work a frontline job in an industry for that 30, 60, 90 days. They just want to be the high level, manager and tell everybody else what to do. And I think that's where, if you don't have connections in the industry, I think that makes me a little nervous, going in something blind with something where somebody has no background in it, not experience, but just background, right? You got to do your homework. You're really messing with lightning in a bottle if you don't do your homework.
Yep.
No, let's put it in baseball. Put it in baseball terms, right? You draft a player in the first round and he gets a ton of money. Guess what? He's going to get every opportunity. He's going to get all the extra coaching. He's going to get all the extra weight training. He's going to get all the extra physical therapy. He's going to get the food programs. You're going to put everything in you can to that player to watch him succeed. How many people are doing that with their business? I mean, it's an investment.
Yeah. No, I think that's an important point. And you mentioned something that I wanted to kind of wrap up with as we're running low on time, and that is risk. You mentioned that the rewards, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but the rewards go to those that take the risk. So here's the question. How does an entrepreneur know when they're financially ready and whether they're in a position where they should take that risk or if they should hold off for a while? What is that kind of magic bullet that would make you feel good about pulling the trigger on a business, financially speaking?
Well, I think it's having a little bit, and that's such a good question. You can go so many different ways. I feel like I'm meeting with my, 401k advisor, and when do I pull it out of the risky into the, the bonds? When do I stop taking that risk to make money and get more safe? I think everybody has a different attitude and MO when it comes to that, what they're more comfortable with. For me personally, it would be really tough, to jeopardize everything financially, and if it doesn't work, to walk away with nothing, right? And completely start over. That being said, when we talked about setting your budget, you really don't know how far you can push things until you have to push things, right? When we talked about what you could live without earlier in the conversation, I don't think we really understand what we're capable to make sure things are succeeding until your back's against the wall and you may not have food on the table for the kids if you don't work this and figure this out. I mean, there's a lot of difference. There's a whole different mentality that goes into that when that fight or flight hormone kicks in. So for me personally, I mean, if I can look at doing something and still maintain what I feel is my life, not without sacrifices, but a minimum threshold that I can do, then I would take the risk. That's just me personally. There's others that would jeopardize everything they could to make it happen, and God bless them for it.
Yeah. No, that's, I think it's important to be organized. It's important to create a plan. It's important to capitalize properly and create budgets and estimates and talk to people in the industry and get an idea of some of the unknowns that might come up, because there are going to be other unknowns. There are going to be you're going to get pressure as much as you can plan. It doesn't matter. You can't plan for everything. So there are going to be unknowns that are going to eventually come. And that's where you're going to get your pressure. That's where you're going to, some of the risk is going to start happening and some of these things. So do your best to plan, but then it's impossible to close the gap completely. At some point, you're going to have to just take the leap. You really are.
Let your athletes be athletes. That's what we like to say on the ball field, right? You can coach and you can mentor, but at some point you got to let your athletes be athletes.
You know what? As we're wrapping up here, I was just at the Masters tournament last weekend in Augusta, Georgia, and the winner, Scotty Scheffler, the morning of, and I think this is starting to become more well known, but he's just become a sensation. He's the number one in the world just recently, and it's all happened pretty much this year. And the morning of the Masters, I can't remember, he has a several stroke lead the Sunday morning of the Masters, the final round. And he's like in tears, and he's like telling his wife, I can't do this. I wasn't built for this. I can't handle this pressure. I'm going to collapse. It's not going to work out. And just a really rough morning for him. And then he tees off, and the rest is history. Right. And so what I realize is that sometimes the buildup is what causes us the most anxiety, right? When you stepped on that field as a pitcher, my guess is you're like, okay, maybe I was throwing up before the game. Maybe I had these nerves, and maybe some of them carry over a little bit, but this is home. This is my place. And this is something I can handle.
There's always nerves, even no matter how long you do it, there were always nerves game day, right? As a pitcher, if you're only throwing, every fifth day as a starter, game day was different. And that's good, I think. It changes your whole mentality. It changes your routine, the way you wake up, what you do, your mindset. And you relate that a lot to business, right? Sports and business, go a lot hand in hand.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, as an entrepreneur, you've got to look at it as game day, right?
Yeah.
It's game day. It's time to go. There should be butterflies. There should be a little bit of unknown.
Exactly.
But if you're ready to be an athlete, you'll figure it out.
Yep.
You prepare for the best that you can. You turn your double plays, you do your PFPs, you take your BP, you do all that. But there's always something in the game that no matter what you do, you just can't prepare for. Same as a startup. You want to have a good plan, a good base. You want to have people you can rely on, and then you'll figure it out.
Yep. I love it. Well, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for your time, Jason. Where can people reach out to you if they have questions about what you're doing, questions about, how they could properly, capitalize themselves and be in a position to start a business?
Sure. You can reach out to LinkedIn's probably great. I'm on LinkedIn, Jason Jarvis, work for BB Living. So you can search me there. You can reach out. I respond. I'm active on it and happy to help. Love it.
Well, thanks so much for your time, Jason. Best of luck in the future.
Allan, always a pleasure. Enjoy your podcast. Keep it up.
All right.
If you have enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a rating. And for daily inspiration and business tips, follow Allan on Instagram. Until next time, remember, we build the future one entrepreneur at a time.